What's good, investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from January 29th to February 4th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. Try to think of these videos as a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the U.S. cannabis industry, identify top U.S. MSOs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future based on their current market cap, and of course the growth potential from new markets coming online, and take advantage whenever you feel ready, if you wish to do so, of course pending whatever incremental reform we're supposed to get from now until the 2024 election. And after 3 long years of hell, the good news is, while this past week we didn't get much definitive news, mostly just speculation, the momentum continues, and we'll take it as Cannabis Pure US ETF ranks #1 on, keep in mind, it's Jeff Quiggle's industry ETFs ranked by price strength and momentum as of February 2nd. And so we're happy the momentum continues. Take from this what you will, but for anyone curious of what these numbers mean, strong is price strength, momentum, price momentum, while RLTV refers to price strength compared to stock market. And so take from that what you will, but we love to see cannabis back on top after so much pain and misery, so the haters can eat it. 2024 has been good so far. And so with that, thank you, Mungie Boy, for sharing this. This is not something I follow very closely after hours buying. I'm not that knowledgeable in investing yet, but main thing is that there were some big purchases or block purchases made. 2 million shares for Green Thumb after hours. TrueLeaf, 2 million shares as well. And while you'll see some canceled, the main thing is that if you're seeing block trades of over 1 million shares, that's the main takeaway. It seems like a big deal. I also saw one for Cresco Labs that was around 7 million shares. And so take from that what you will as well. Again, all the links will always be in the comments, but this was the big news that we got. And again, it's still speculation because it's not confirmed, but ultimately we're trusting John Schroyer's source, and John Schroyer is a writer for the Green Market Report, I believe. Ultimately, though, the first tweet came out. Source out of Washington, D.C. says cannabis rescheduling is imminent. And no wonder there's been so many senators calling for descheduling this week. And if they know it won't happen, which is unfortunate because we all want descheduling, but we'll take what we can get at this point, it's a safe political play, and they position themselves in front of November. While another tweet was some more chatter I've heard since yesterday is the administration wants Schedule 3 announcement this month, February, but who knows if that'll actually come true. 2 more sources today told me the word is Biden admin wants a Schedule 3 announcement from DEA by the end of Q1 or before State of the Union on March 7th. And so as of February 1st, still we'll wait and see if it actually happens. Now, this was John Schroyer on the Dales Report, and it was a great interview. He pops in around 6 minutes and 50 seconds. Main thing is I'm not going to play it because he just reiterates what he said in that tweet, but the other thing that he mentioned is once the announcement is made, and the DEA comment period will likely be 60 days, there's a possibility, and it's always the best case scenario, so chances are it won't actually happen because it's the best case scenario, and shit always happens, but the idea would be after the 60-day comment period, we could see some action within 90 days. And so he mentions this around the 1350 mark. Link in the comments if you want to go through and watch that interview. While just to try and verify what John says from his sources, we have Ashley Southall from the New York Times and New York Times Metro. And while they've been reporting garbage for a while now, she also says, I've heard Q1 as well. And so take from that what you will. While a third source doesn't necessarily confirm what John is saying, but from Julie Tsikin, who for NBC News is one of the few that shares cannabis stories, saying Senator Warren, Fetterman, Schumer are putting new pressure on the White House to ease cannabis restrictions as the DEA weighs on it. And so it's nice to see the story pushed out in NBC News as Democrats urge Biden admin to deschedule cannabis. And this is exactly that example of they know it won't happen, but it's a good political play and puts them in a favorable light before the election. And so this is that letter from MJ Stock Trader. Thank you for sharing this, just so I can kind of share with you all the juice. Main thing is, obviously, the DEA should deschedule cannabis. We would all love for that to be the case, but we'll take the incremental reform as opposed to nothing, not only because it's had a devastating impact on communities and Americans, but ultimately it's just because it was put in there based on lies, and it should have never been put in there in the first place. And so irony, though, is that we can't have nice things because the president continues to just make false statements. And you know with an election coming up, he's not going to stop because so many of the Dem voters' gods have become either social justice or one of the new repackaged modern fads like gender theory or degrowth through the climate agenda. And so it just fits into that narrative, which is unfortunate. So more on that if you wanted to go through it, but great comment from Very Sharp down here because It's, if you know, you know, right? And so Don Murphy wanted to give you the stage as a safer update when we all thought that might have been dead in the water. So let us know what's new, Don.
Hello, Twitter friends from Capitol Hill. Don Murphy here. Some interesting news. I had a conversation with one of the SAFE co-sponsors on the Republican side who didn't have any reason to pull any punches on Senator Schumer, but said, you'll be happy, just be patient. My response was, I've been working on this for about a decade, so, but I'm feeling very optimistic, and given the opportunity to take a swipe at Senator Schumer, this Republican did not. So I'm not going to tell you to be nice, but just be aware that it is not Senator Schumer who is to blame here. So with that said, speaking of blame, our friends in the opposition efforts, Project Sam, had a press conference.
Maybe not this time until we hear about another robbery, though.
Today, usual suspects, Prohibition Pete Ricketts, Prohibition Pete Sessions, have a resolution on research. Big deal. That's not news, and quite honestly, it's not going anywhere, so don't worry about that. It was great to have Mackenzie Peterson from Advisor Shares on the Hill.
And well, thank you very much, Don, for at least highlighting what's meaningful and what isn't, and how so much is just a show. You got to be able to laugh at it, I guess, those damn bastards from Sam. But with that, one of the big news updates of the week, but I'd still say it's speculation until we reach the point and it actually happens. But thanks, Boris, for sharing this German health minister on cannabis rescheduling deal. Here we go, and this is from Prof. Karl Lauterbach himself. We agreed on the final details, cannabis of legalization last night. The fight against the black market, decriminalization, and better protection of minors will come as announced. The previous drug policy has failed and a new beginning. And so this was a big deal and probably just why a lot of the momentum picked up. And so just to reiterate from Marijuana Moment, more on the story, if you wanted to grab the link and go through it, I'm not going to go through this entire thing, but just to highlight the expected dates for this. They say they've reached a final agreement on the bill to legalize, resolving outstanding agreements that have delayed action and setting the stage for a vote in the final week of February. So we will keep tabs and try and hold them accountable, and enactment in April. And so, of course, they're giving us their word again, but they've given us their word in the past, and then they kick the can down the road. So take from that what you will. But, of course, this is a big deal, as if they've kicked the can down the road in the past, they can't keep doing that, and they realize they have to keep their word, and hence this publication. And so this is straight out of Germany. This was the first one we saw. You can translate it into English. I'll share a little bit with you, but the full link in the comments if you wanted to go through that, from ziet.de. And so with that, onto some studies. Wanted to share this one from Benzinga. Exclusive 32% ditch painkillers for cannabis. You love when even Bloomberg analysts are starting to pay attention to the medical data, because that highlights, you know, the momentum, and the story could be real this time, folks. We're witnessing a significant pivot in cannabis consumer habits, says Bloomberg analyst. Cannabis consumers are increasingly seeking brands based on environmental and social values, says Kenneth J. Yeah, maybe if you want to sound trendy and relevant as an analyst, or maybe we're just glad we finally have the choice and the access to legal cannabis after so damn long. But what does he find? We're witnessing a considerable pivot in consumer habits, with 32% of our survey participants choosing cannabis over painkillers and 33% over alcohol, Shea said. So close to 1 in 3 in each category. No doubt that's making Big Pharma and alcohol scared in their boots, hence why we're at this tipping point. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read, but majority still choosing flower, 44% more inclined towards edibles like gummies and chocolates. And so with that, from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, we do love a headline like this. It could be written a lot better, highlighting that when states legalize, youth use goes down, because this implies that in states where cannabis is not legal, teens are also using less. And I don't know if that's true. So kind of misleading, Marilyn. And then also, like tobacco, like alcohol, there's not a safe way for adolescents to use cannabis. You got to stop treating cannabis like alcohol, like tobacco, because they're not the same. And I'm not condoning adolescents using cannabis. I mean, from 16 to 20, I used a ton, and I think I could only have gotten through university thanks to cannabis. I couldn't have gotten through without it. But ultimately, I'm not condoning it, just saying is like, man, get your priorities straight, Marilyn. So while I've talked on all of this before, I'm not going to spend much time on it. You can pause to read. Main thing is that this builds off of a study that I would have shared a few weeks ago, came out earlier this month out of Washington, published by the CDC, that youth use goes down where cannabis is legal. But get this, while teen boys previously used cannabis at a higher rate than teen girls, yet again, the girls are passing the boys. Female users now surpass males in all age groups. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read. But from the Jerusalem Post, as a new study, which falls in line with a lot of old news, suggests that 17th century Italians were cannabis users. Yeah, is this a surprise to anybody? Humans have been using cannabis for centuries, for 10,000 years at least. And so while it's nice that this is coming to light again, new peer-reviewed study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science established that 17th century Italians used cannabis for rec purposes or medicinal purposes. And so what do you know? Love this, as researchers analyzed 9 femoral bones belonging to 7 males and 2 females. And so you can pause to read more here. I just figured I'd share this as it's more of a readable sort of story on it, but the actual study from Science Direct as well. Main things to highlight as this Milano review in the 1600s. Findings of Delta-9 THC and CBD in bone samples of the 17th century, likely rec use of cannabis plants in the 1600s. Like, no shit. And so again, this is not really new news to anyone that's done their cannabis research, but we love to see more of this coming to light. While from the Columbian, and it's almost like you've seen this headline before, study finds cannabis can motivate users to exercise. The propaganda runs too deep, and it's almost like, man, if only there was a tool that could help get lazy people off of opioids and off of drinking and off of junk food, and so that they could actually, build habits that would make them feel good about themselves. It's just wild. And so we love more and more data pointing out the facts and how much of the old propaganda was a farce. And as a cannabis consumer and as someone that stays fit and exercises regularly and trains, and my health is very important to me, all I know is that when push comes to shove, I'm not a big guy, but I feel so good knowing that I will run circles around any anxiety-ridden, pill-popping, booze-guzzling, fatty bobatty that tries to impose their political science views on me. Like, you'll be asleep in 5 seconds. It's just fantastic. I'm not condoning ever throwing the first punch. But if they ever lay a hand on you, my God, it's game on and good night. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read. But again, I love exposing these lies and the fact that cannabis can get people to move. What do you know? At a JAMA network, a little older, but cannabis and driving in older adults. What's the association between retail cannabis availability, driving, and associated THC levels in people over 65 years of age? And so very interesting. 31 regular users aged 65 to 79. As the findings suggest that older drivers, even if they regularly use cannabis, show evidence of impaired driving performance after smoking cannabis. Fair enough. Probably like people that have a low tolerance and are not used to smoking cannabis. Hence why no one would want to do it if they're not used to smoking cannabis. But you got to ask, could a factor of this be that they're 65 to 79 years old and just naturally, unfortunately, how time works in reality, their eyesight's getting a little bit worse, their coordination is slowly coming off a little bit, hence we should be a bit cautious about allowing older people to drive one-ton bullets in the first place. I digress, though. I'm not saying that I want to condone driving under the influence, though if you have experience doing it and your tolerance is high, it's just different than alcohol. I will say that. And while I don't drive now, I live downtown. When I used to drive, I was a phenomenal stone driver from 16 to 21 before I quit to go teach English overseas for that period of time. And no accidents, only one speeding ticket. And so, again, not saying I condone it, but I just think it is different than driving drunk, and it's worth the research. And so more here if you want to pause to read. And they conclude that older drivers should exercise caution after smoking cannabis. Fair enough, much like they ought to exercise caution after a few glasses of wine or a couple of beers. And I'm just saying, because humans have vices, and we're not perfect, and if I had to choose, I would rather old people driving around a little bit stoned than after a few glasses of wine or a few beers. But that's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments. And so, of course, full link, as always, will also be in the comments. On to some sales news. Keep in mind, it's the 2nd of February, the 3rd of February today when I'm recording this. And so we're going to have to wait probably till next week until we get more state sales data published. But from Greenwave Advisors, mass sales trend, main thing to highlight is that while the rec growth is slowing, it is still growing. And so that's promising, and ultimately I think as prices go down, people are going to spend more, and that's just going to help continue at least the rec market growth in Massachusetts. And so take from that what you will from Greenwave Advisors, source state of Massachusetts and GWA estimates. While from connoisseurs.io, Florida OMMU weekly update, Jan 26th to February 1st. And so we'll look at total flower sales in ounces by company this past week. Total THC sales in milligrams by company this past week. Total CBD sales in milligrams by company this past week. And then total dispensing locations by company this past week as well. Can't wait to see that rec market with 618 legal sources. And so just to scroll down to see, patient count jumped up to 872,376. Looks something like 1,000 or so month over month. But I'll put the raw OMMU data in the comments as well and put that exact number once I publish tomorrow. And so with that, from Christopher Norman, New Jersey started January 1st, 2024 with 90 cannabis dispensaries. Well, according to Chris, the count robustly increased to 98 at the end of the month. I love the enthusiasm, Chris, although I don't think you can use the word robust to describe the addition of just 8. But we are happy to see New Jersey get more stores to decrease the bottleneck there. The Gov data will be in the comments if you want to go through that. Well, happy to share this from Bloomberg. Now, I don't necessarily know where they're getting all their Jan sales data yet. I didn't find much, but according to Bloomberg, weed sales boom in dry January as people drink less. And you can just imagine New Year's resolutions. Oh, I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to find a healthier substitute. Fair enough. Go for it. And according to Bloomberg, cannabis sales rise in Jan as detoxing drinkers swap drugs. And so I hope next week I'll have a lot of state sales data to relay. At least Illinois usually comes out around the 4th of the month. Perception of weed as healthier threatens alcohol industry. The fact that weed is healthier certainly threatens the alcohol industry and more. Pharma, tobacco. Well, these are usually behind a paywall. I guess I can actually show you where they get this from. But I guess they spoke to CureLeaf that said there's a lot of people coming into dispensaries saying they're not drinking for January either, and they're seeing more increased basket sizes when they purchase. And then to compare that from Bloomberg, this January is set to be the driest since pandemic, as observed alcohol sales fell by 52% in the first week of the year, the most on record. So that's what they're going off of. But again, next week I'll have more data for you, hopefully. Full link in the comments if you wanted to go through that from Bloomberg. Well, just to highlight, though, how, again, sadly, we're at an age where journalism and the quality of it is sadly in the toilet. As we can see, Bloomberg sharing this article, weed sales boom in dry January as people drink less. What I'm going to show you next is an article from ChicagoBusiness.com highlighting that we don't have independent journalism anymore. At this point in time, publications are just propagandist networks publishing the same story wherever they can and creating a narrative. Fascinating to see it in real time. But with that, on to MSO news, as CureLeaf to report fourth quarter and fiscal year end 2023 financial and operational results. And they're going to report after market close on March 6th. 2024. This will be a week after Verano and Greentham, who'll be reporting at the end of February, and so looking forward to that. A little over a month. We're going to have a nice update on how these companies are coming along. But had to share this story from Westward as more unfortunate than anything. But CureLeaf sells a 36-acre cannabis cultivation facility to Mammoth Farms. Now, this was a big story in 2021 as they paid $67 million for it. But while they say here that CureLeaf didn't comment and the Mammoth owner didn't want to say how much they paid, I saw a tweet on Twitter that said that the Mammoth owner paid less than $2 million for it. Now, I don't know how true that is. I'll try and find it and put it in the comments, and so correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe someone just tweeted that for shock value and I bought it, but you can kind of see how that happens, and I just don't know. Like, I haven't been in business and investing for long enough to understand. I guess that's normal in the sense that when you're in business, you're making a lot of investments, and most of them aren't going to pan out, but you're hoping that the few do pan out and then some and pay for themselves. Let me know if you just have more context from being involved maybe in the cannabis industry or other industries. Just curious, thinking out loud. But with that, from Morningstar, CureLeaf, truly, Verano could benefit from cannabis reclassification. Yes, no shit. So the classic investor write-up covering essentially everything I cover on my videos. So just leaving it here for anyone interested. Pause to read, otherwise grab the full link if you want to go through what Morningstar has to say. A bit of a more bearish take, saying a decision is expected by the end of 2024, though. Hence, treating the election as a bit of a sell the news event. But let me know in the comments how you plan to play it. Well, from MJBiz Daily, Cannabis MSOs focusing on wholesale growth in 2024 makes me feel a little bit better about my massive Cresco bags. And so this comes from, I guess, an interview with Western Region General Manager at Florida-based MSO Ayr Wellness. And Mendola said Ayr and other MSOs are prioritizing wholesale for two reasons. Many vertically integrated businesses have reached or are approaching their maximum number of retail licenses in key states, such as Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York, and limited capital available to the industry means fewer companies will grow through mergers and acquisitions or by obtaining more licenses. Also, it's just the fact that any states with social equity plays are hopefully seeing some of those dispensaries finally come online, and wholesale is just best way to just get into those and be selling through those places as well and get a little bit of money there. And so more price compression and store dynamics if you wanted to pause to read and get deep into the weeds, but not going to spend too much time on this one either. Building value for retailers. Obviously, if they can get a little piece of the pie and through the distribution and wholesale, that's the whole idea. But we'll see how that plays out, as wholesale hasn't really been the best strategy since 2021 and since capital has been so hard to get. That we got an announcement out of Ayr. So the original announcement was that they announced closing date for previously announced plan of arrangement is targeted for on or around February 7th. And so what I found out, yay for me, and anyone holding Ayr Wellness before February 5th, we're going to apparently get warrants added into our account on the 7th of February, so that's awesome. But main thing to explain is that Ayr employs the term anti-dilutive to mean warrants granted to existing shareholders are intended to offset the dilution from pushing their debt 2 years back. And so, again, I'm not the one to explain this. I had to ask them what's going to happen, but assuming that we'll find out more on the 7th of Feb. So I'm going to put this link in the comments if you want to go through that. and read a little bit more, but I assume if you own Ayr Wellness, you already know about this. But thank you, Sammy, for explaining this to the layperson, because yeah, this is where I was like, I got no idea what you're talking about. And so, but apparently on February 7th, I'll have some warrants for the first time ever show up in my Questrade account. So that's pretty cool. So with that, from Pablo Zwenek, link to our latest ZNA report, what to look for when the DEA news breaks in the coming days, weeks, and months. So this report, the link will be in the comments as well. Most recent from Pablo as of yesterday, February 2nd, 2024. And so with that, from Todd Harrison, these are little snippets from investment firms. So as always, take them with a grain of salt. This is the first time I've ever heard of Veda Partners on U.S. cannabis. But they seem to believe that it is most likely the DEA will issue a proposed rule in February. So that will be the DEA responding, likely yes to HHS. Then that'll be a 60-day comment period. And then from that comment period ending into maybe an October final rule. That's sort of the timeline they are rolling out here. So again, take it with a grain of salt. Plan accordingly for your own situation. But that is what Veda Partners has to say. While AGP on U.S. cannabis, MSO valuations become more attractive post-280E. Don't need to explain that to you, I don't think. Obviously, once that tax is gone and they can pay 21% tax rate like every other business in America, as opposed to 70%, as now they've been effectively working for the federal government. And so source company reports and AGI. And last one from ATB on U.S. cannabis, another chart. But thanks, Todd, for sharing this so that I can share this all with you. Potential equity value upside, potential multiple expansion. Take these with a grain of salt, but another bit of info to take in and compare with what you already know. And so with that, from Toby Cannabis, another view on each MSO's performance since the HHS news, August 30th of 2023, looking at market cap change. Money inflows obviously highly correlated to market caps, which makes sense. And so obviously the bigger players have had more money flow in already. So I'm kind of dabbling with these guys because I know greater risk, greater reward. I'll make my bags back here and then I'll hopefully make some more new money here. But it's just worth remembering that when we had the big run in Canada in 2018, Canadian cannabis companies were making about $10 million in revenue a quarter, not profit. And they were valued at the peak at about $25 billion. And imagine what these companies are doing once they're actually making a profit, what their valuations can shoot up to. It's going to be incredible to watch. And so with that, last one from CBS News about MSOs. Just wanted to share this story as it was making its rounds. It's unique. I'm not going to rush to buy it, but Chicago company Cresco Labs introduces cannabis-infused wing sauce for Super Bowl LV3. And so, while I can't buy it because it's in Chicago, I'd obviously try it, but I'm going to stick to smoking my flower versus probably converting to THC food if I'm going to say so myself. Links in the comments if you want to go through that, but happy to share some of the victories out of the states. Missouri cannabis revenue will mean nearly $20 million to support veterans this year. We need more of this. Great job, Missouri. This is the sort of shit we want to see, and this is really the long-term benefits of just getting rid of ridiculous prohibition and working for the people in your state. Since Missouri's cannabis sales began in 2019, the state has collected more than $150 million in revenue from taxes and program fees. And again, all that matters really is how is this being allocated back. And I imagine in more states than not, it's being allocated poorly, but we just hope over time that allocation can improve and goes back to the people that need it the most. Look at this one from Marijuana Moment. The headline that looks good until you get to that buzzword: Minnesota cannabis regulators outline plan to expedite legal sales and give early advantages to these types of businesses. And so, do you trust that they're trying to provide equal access to opportunity? Or are we smart enough now, after witnessing what has happened in New York, to understand that the regulators are possibly Marxist and they're anti-American and they want to run this business into the ground, much like New York? And the goal would be to provide equal outcomes to everybody that applies for a license, meaning they don't get a license. Hence, and we're going to get to 4 or 5 more new headlines about New York. You just wait. But to prove my point and what I'm trying to highlight, get this. The plan comes from Minnesota's Office of Cannabis Management. It's the same name as New York. That's why I don't trust it at all, which would require a change in statute from state lawmakers to expedite this, right? And help prevent a licensing bottleneck. What have they created in New York? A licensing bottleneck. We want to include a mechanism for temporary licenses, particularly for social equity applicants, said during a public webinar hosted by OCM. It's New York in Minnesota. I do not want this to pass. So hopefully the lawmakers that are supposed to vote on this see through the bullshit and the farce that is equity and say no to this and just do the best thing in providing equal access to opportunity to the most qualified potential business owners that apply. And I'm just going to stop it there because, again, we don't know much more about this plan. It just, the more I read, the more it sounds like New York. And ultimately, it's up to lawmakers to approve it. So I'll update you if they do. But here is New York. So this one's stuck behind a paywall. All I can really show you is the title, but it speaks for itself and how much of a farce Hochul in New York, the Office of Cannabis Management is. As Hochul says, cannabis rollout was a disaster, but fixing it is unlikely. Now, the grammar is hilarious because you typically use but when you're delivering bad news with good news, or good news with bad news, because that's why you say but. You flip from one to the other. Now, the sentence should just read, Hochul says cannabis rollout was a disaster and fixing it is unlikely, because she hasn't fired the incompetent idiots that have created the disaster in the first place. And so that link will be in the comments, though I doubt any of you have a subscription to Buffalo News. On top of that, from Syracuse, I have zero faith, because equity was never about providing equal access to opportunity, as these communists claim. It was always about selling the dream for votes. And here we are today. As applicants for New York cannabis licenses say regulators are shifting the goalposts because they have no idea what they're doing, and they hate the American ideals of taking responsibility for yourself, building things from the ground up, community, God, all that. They hate it. That's why they're trying to do everything to destroy what could have been an amazing American market thus far in New York. Legacy operators, minority women, industry consultants are calling the OCM's licensing scheme alarming and say the agency has again shifted the goalposts at the last minute. Honestly, at this point, I feel like giving up. It's just so sad. You got to feel for the people of New York at this point. And so apparently now a New York State Supreme Court judge will decide today whether to issue an injunction, which would again halt the Empire State's legal cannabis rollout. Equity in action. Nobody gets opportunity because of incompetent idiots that haven't been fired yet, as part of yet another lawsuit filed by plaintiffs. And so Hochul claiming what I told you in the last story. Additionally, the CCB and OCM are facing 2 more lawsuits that we just got this past week, both which seek an injunction. So of course you can pause to read, full link in the comments, but the problems don't stop there. So the first lawsuit claims New York discriminated against white men in cannabis industry as setbacks mount, which it absolutely did, in the sense that when New York vocally said they would prioritize people of color, people with a criminal record, and people harmed by the war on drugs, that blatantly discriminated against veterans who said, we needed cannabis way more than you, and fought back with that lawsuit that got the initial injunctions lifted in the first place. And so, yes, I mean, that is racism in action. The New York board, again, optically, for a blue state, trying to right the past wrong, which it looks like they're doing, but at the same time, blatant discrimination is illegal in America. Hence why DEA is getting so much kickback, because while it implies that it's a good thing with compassionate language, it's just repackaged Marxism, trying to reduce diversity of thought and introduce diversity of skin color, trying to bring about equity as opposed to equal access to opportunity and equality, and then inclusion is you can be included unless you think differently, then you're scum and we want to tear you down, right? And so, anyways, interestingly enough, though, that this lawsuit comes after the incompetent OCM blatantly just postpones their meeting, which should have been essentially giving equal access to opportunity at that meeting. But equity doesn't want to allow for that. And then so the second lawsuit, Green Market Report again, thank you, John Schroyer, for reporting on all this, as the second lawsuit comes from a group of women entrepreneurs who allege state cannabis regulators broke the rules with how they created and are trying to implement a randomized queue of more than 2,000 dispensary license applicants. And so, I mean, I would say that this is probably a better lawsuit, or a lawsuit with more odds of winning than this one, based on the argument, but I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, but just interesting enough, why we can't have nice things. You got to get rid of the people that created the problem, because insanity is trying to solve a problem with the same thinking that got you there. It's not going to happen. And then lastly, from Green Market Report, get this, New York Social Equity licensee winner denied store location for being too close to an MSO. Can you imagine that? You get all the way through, you're like the lucky sperm, and then you get shut down. And so apparently it's a technicality, because whether this was in the CAURD rules or just the legalization policy, every legal cannabis shop in New York is required to be at least 1,000 feet from another such shop. Now, as a Canadian, I'm not versed in the distance of measurement using feet, but come on, this is New York, Manhattan. There's millions of people walking around all the time. That seems like such a dumb, arbitrary rule they should get rid of. And hers was only 650 feet from the GTI shop. And so hopefully the board will exercise some discretion and grant that. But can you imagine? So when the state promises equity, she's waited so long, and then a lawsuit and court order froze all the CAURD license processing from mid-August until the end of November. And that was again lifted recently. After which La Piozzi's post-election applicant was submitted to the OCM on December 14th. So if equity was really about delaying people's opportunity for a chance at anything, we're seeing that play out. And then, so get this, a little over a month after, on Jan 24th, she found out the OCM denies her chosen site because it was too close because of this technical rule. And so hopefully they just have some discretion and let her open it up, because I don't think it's really going to affect her sales or Green Thumb sales, because this is Manhattan after all. But oh gosh, New York is so stressful. And so on to Oregon from Marijuana Moment. Oregon company withdraws interstate cannabis trade lawsuit. Seems like a big deal because they say big things are coming very soon. While that headline looks very promising, this is strictly nothing but speculation, as I want to take you down to the main juice I found in here. And so it's not clear what might have led to the company to drop its legal challenge, as there's no explanation. The move, first reported by Law 360, may signal that the company expects a future development that would allow interstate commerce, though it's also possible the company is concerned that an unfavorable ruling would cause more harm than good. So take from that what you will. Pure speculation. Full link in the comments if you want to go through that. While update out of Ohio from Marijuana Moment, officials release first proposed cannabis licensing rules amid push for expedited adult use sales. Now, it seems like these are the new rules, although they seem sort of in line with what I believe was the original rules that the citizens of Ohio voted on. So James, I think one of my viewers from Ohio, let me know in the comments if I'm accurate on that or not, but from my understanding now, the proposed rules would require regulators to open applications for medical cannabis operators seeking a dual license by June 7th. So that would take some time, probably from June, to see some sales for adult use out of existing med. Well, they would need to start approving provisional licenses to eligible entities by September 7th. Well, they also want an exclusive application window for you-know-what, and jobs programs being developed. While regulators also want to eliminate medical cannabis patient and caregiver registration fees while reducing the med fees from $100K to $50K, which would be nice for everyone across the board. While reforms were included in the voter passed legislation initiative, which also stipulates that patients will not be subject to the recreational excise tax on medical cannabis products. So big win for patients. But last thing, stakeholders interested in commenting on the rules are welcome to submit feedback by February 9th. I look forward to the day where the word stakeholders is removed from any American industry like the cannabis one, and it's replaced with shareholders and stockholders. Because while capitalism is the only system that at least allows for prosperity, like any system, it can get contaminated with greed. Hence why you just need quality individuals with integrity and values to stand up to the temptation that leads to so many succumbing to the greed. And you know what, but I just can't stand that word, stakeholders. Ugh. And you just see it a lot in this industry, unfortunately. But with that, from Marijuana Moment, new Kentucky cannabis bill, HB 420, baby, would legalize it for adults, but faces uphill battle in GOP-controlled legislature. And so while this is early, just going to share that at least some people are trying to legalize for adult use in Kentucky, and we love the effort, and love that they're making it comical as well. But a 9% excise tax would be imposed both on wholesale and retail, and local governments could levy an additional licensing fee of up to 5% for the privilege of operating within the limits of local government. Why the hell does the government have to give us any permission to do anything? They work for us. We don't work for them. What have we let ourselves get to? My God. And so, little world tour before we end off from Business of Cannabis. Spain's medical cannabis laws to be ready in the coming months, says Health Minister. I guess they're going to be adjusted because when I went in 2018, you could buy CBD-rich flower from little shops that were technically called medical, but there was no THC. And so, more than a year after it was initially scheduled to be rolled out, thanks, Monica Gomez. Can't rely on politicians to do anything, right? But good news is it was recommended that cannabis be prescribed for spasticity in patients with MS, some forms of epilepsy, nausea and vomiting caused by chemotherapy, endometriosis, and chronic pain. And so this year is all we get, though. So can't really trust her to follow through on that, even though they wrote an order and drafted it. Just, we need to see some action, Miss Garcia Gomez. And so last thing to touch on is just, whenever we see the 1961 Single Drug Convention on Narcotic Drugs, reminds us that who is the International Narcotics Control Board? Why do they exist? That from MJBiz Daily. Czech Republic's Economic Council wants regulated cannabis market. Yeah, no shit, to help spur economic growth. Why is prohibition still a thing anywhere? Likely due to the stupid International Narcotics Control Board, which we ought to get rid of. But main thing is I can just summarize this whole article for you, but a timeline for when draft law could be made public is not available. And so money talks in America, but not so much in Czech Republic, I guess. But big win for Americans, hey, as the DEA rehires agent fired over a positive drug test from CBD, agreeing to provide back pay in lawsuit settlement because the man's right to take a legal medicine in his state should supersede the DEA's right to try and fire him for taking a legal medicine in that state. Boom! Big win for Americans here. Full link in the comments if you want to go through that. I'll bring you down a little bit more if you want to go through the whole story, but obviously should have never been fired in the first place. But with that, an update from Weed Street 420 as of Jan 30th, short positions to date as of Jan 30th. I don't know where you got this necessarily, but hey, the balls on these shorts. We wish them well, and we can't wait to watch them burn in flames next week, hopefully, or at least from now until March. But with that, an update on a timeline from some feedback on one of these recent lawsuits from Christopher Norman, so thank you. U.S. Justice Department filed its motion to dismiss Verano et al.'s suit challenging Cannabis Schedule 1 CSA on Jan 3rd. Boise law firm has 14 days to file its opposition brief, so by next Tuesday, which would be February 6th, then the U.S. Justice Department's reply brief would be due February 13th. And so, of course, they could request an extra week, and more time can be dragged on, and the goalpost can be moved, but just providing you what I know as of right now, because I do believe Christopher Norman is a lawyer out of New Jersey. And so that's, at least take from that what you will. And last bit, folks, full link is in the comments. I highly recommend tuning in, as Dan is very informative, and some of the technical setup is back, signaling that the bull market is starting again. And so if you don't know the chart, guys, or you're new to cannabis investing, definitely watch. But I'm going to play 2 minutes and 41 seconds from the beginning to highlight where we've been and why technicals are beginning to matter again, and what that indicates to him and to us that we're in a new bull cycle, and we wouldn't have it any other way with all this momentum and the wind behind our back. So take it away, Dan.
Hey everyone, I'm Charting Man Dan. I've been trading cannabis stocks for 13 years and 3 months at this point. We're going to check in on the sector after another bullish week, but definitely a lot of volume, a lot of things being shuffled around into the close today, and we'll take a look at that, watching for the potential of some rotation to begin taking place. As always, thanks for the likes and the shares. Our analytics on Twitter and YouTube are telling us that people want cannabis content, so we're going to make more of it as long as that's the information that we are receiving. So we're going to talk longer term real quick, and then we're going to zoom into today's action. As I mentioned, talk a little bit about rotation. But first things first, as the thumbnail says, a first for cannabis stock. So January has now closed, and this is the first time that MSOS has ever closed above monthly EMA 12 resistance after 1, 2, 3, 4, essentially 5 little rejections over the last couple of years. It's now support. We also have the first ever confirmed monthly uptrend with a higher low and a higher high. These are two things that the bulls really wanted to see happen. We are now in an uptrend on the monthly, weekly, daily time frame. We have not been able to say that in a very, very long time.
It's been years.
So I'm now going to cut away to a little short clip from a video that I did.
And I'll be the first to admit, I don't really pay much attention to technicals, but I'm really going to start watching and try to learn from Dan, as, you know, it seems to be the time to find signals and pay attention again.
6 months ago, trying to find the cannabis sector bottom, and that was somewhere around here is when I filmed this video. And I'm going to talk in the video, you'll see things that I said have to happen, and then compare it to where we stand right now.
Shift momentum, but let's go big picture. Monthly charts have a ton of work to do. When's the last time we've been in monthly uptrends? Not since the all-time highs. So we can say the next time we have monthly uptrends confirmed in the sector, things will be significantly different than we've seen in years. And so what I have to see is full follow through, a monthly higher low, and a monthly higher high. And so part of changing long-term trends, you have to sit through red months. So we're going to be watching the long-term timeframes as well, because we are not full steam ahead for the bulls until we have confirmed monthly, weekly, daily uptrends all aligning. And right now, the monthly charts have a long way to go. And look at I use the EMA 12.
Gives me more time to average down on that cannabis position of mine.
The red line here, we held it as support on the way up. It's rejecting as resistance on the way down. Here comes a key test yet again. You'll hear me talk about EMA 12 a lot because it's a guide of mine. And for CureLeaf, that's the next monthly hurdle that we're looking at.
So as I said, monthly charts have a long way to go. 6 months ago, it took 6 months for this to shape up, and we now have it in terms of a monthly uptrend.
And so take from that what you will, folks, but just happy to relay everything this week. And that is it for today's episode. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you next week for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.